in 4 children in Australia will have some form of unwanted sexual touch or activity before they turn 18. But when we talk about children with disability, it doubles, 1 in 2. So essentially that's 50% of children with a disability will have some form of unwanted sexual touch before they turn 18. How does an individual get themselves into a position where they can create child pornography on their personal device when at work? Well, there's only one way that can happen, is that they're left children. We need to educate children, but a child with a disability needs extra education.
If you are day in, day out doing that, how do you manage yourself and keep yourself a bit more normal or sane?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. My short answer has always been, well, how can I not do that work? Someone's got to do the work, but I do enjoy helping
The outcomes,
people.
yeah.
I do enjoy seeing an outcome. Got a lot of job satisfaction responding to sexually abused women and children, and even though it's not a nice subject matter, that I was helping them or helping to seek justice, and sometimes it's not about that. The older I get and the more I've been in that space, I've come to understand it's not so much about the justice, it's actually more about the healing.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good this time of the year, put it that way.
Thank you for your time today, and thank you for you being part of our International Women's Day conversation this year.
You're welcome.
I would like to get to know more about you and your story and your growing up in the farm and then a journey in the police.
Sure. Yes. Well, do you want me to just... I'll take it from the beginning. So I joined WA Police. Well, it was a funny story, actually. I was in high school and I originally wanted to be a hairdresser when I was in high school, which is worlds apart from a police officer, I know, but that's what it was at the time. And I was in year 9 and a group of girls had decided not to go to school that day and to go catch the bus into Fremantle. And although I didn't feel comfortable doing it, I went along with it because that's what you do when you fall under the peer pressure spell. So we went into Fremantle and we were all to, the whole idea was to steal something, which goes completely against how I was raised, completely against the way I lived my life. But again, peer pressure. So, yeah, I did it. I was in with all the other girls and there was about 6 of us at the time and the only one to get caught was myself, obviously, because I was no good at stealing. I didn't have any experience. And anyway, I got caught and I was 14 years of age and a policewoman came then and spoke to me and made such an impression on me at that time. I was never charged with stealing or anything, but she made such an impression on me that it was from that day forward that I thought I would join the WA Police. And so I did. And when I was old enough, I applied for the cadetship and I was successful and I went in at 17 years of age as a cadet. I spent a couple of years as a cadet before going into the police academy and in 1988 I graduated from the police academy. But it was a time in the 80s when police women still wore high heel shoes and skirts and there weren't many of us. I looked at the data at the time. I think police women made up about 2% of the total police population at the time. 98% were men and 2% were women. And so what that meant on the ground on a day-to-day basis was we were tasked with the responding to sexual and physical abuse of women and children. And that was the standard operation procedures, is that if a child or a woman was abused physically or sexually, a policewoman needed to respond or be involved. But of course, there weren't many of us. So what that meant was that was a job that you did quite often in the early days of policing. So I was a junior constable. I had not long graduated from the police academy and I was working down at Fremantle Police Station. And a young mum comes into the police station with her small child. And she's come into the police station to tell me about the sexual abuse one of her brothers was perpetrating. And long story short, I interviewed this little girl or took her witness statement about what had happened to her. And yes, she had told me she was being made to play games no 4-year-old should ever be made to play. But there wasn't enough. She wasn't giving me enough information to allow me then to do something with that information. So after about 50 minutes, I said to Mum, I said, look, it's really good that she's come in and she's given me some information, but it's not enough. I'll show you the door, basically. And even as a 19-year-old, so someone that's really just out of childhood themselves, dealing with such a serious issue, even at 19, I didn't feel that was sufficient. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough of a service. It was still the police force then, but we were still providing a service. And to me, in my mind, it wasn't much of a service because, you know, a young child has been sexually abused. She's brave enough to come in and tell us about it, and we show them the door. The irony of that is that if it was a stranger, at least we would have had a brochure to give her or some written material to give her. But back in 1988, we had nothing. So I got on with it, as you do. You get on with it. I didn't feel right about it, but you get on with it. And I'm 19 myself, and my career has just started. But 6 months later, I'm in a van. I'm on patrol, and I get a call from the shift sergeant, and he says, Andrea, return to the station. There's a young mother here, and she's asked for you specifically. I'll relieve you in the van. Come back and see what she wants. Anyway, so I go back, and I see it's this same woman, and I remember her, and I remember the little girl, who's now 5. And I thought they were coming in because the little girl had remembered something else, and I was starting to feel a little bit optimistic. And I took her down into the interview room where we used to interview children at Fremantle Police Station, and I interviewed her. But very sadly, she was there 6 months later to tell me about the other uncle who had started to make her play games she should never be playing. So, Dev, for me, I think that was the epiphany moment. That was the moment where I went, you just can't keep doing this.
No.
So I then looked into other ways that we can protect children, that we can, I mean, it was my job to respond to them, and I got a lot of job satisfaction responding to sexually abused women and children. And even though it's not a nice subject matter, you know, having an understanding that I was helping them or either helping to seek justice, and sometimes it's not about that. And the older I get and the more I've been in that space, I've come to understand it's not so much about the justice, it's actually more about the healing. Justice can only do so much. It's more about the healing. So then I spent a long time, and I think it took me about 20 years before it actually happened, to change the way police respond to little children who may come in and give part of the story but not the remainder of the story. And so now, and in fact, my induction into the inaugural Women's Day Hall of Fame was about changing the way police respond to children. And no longer do they, I mean, there are, the way police operate, it's on, you know, it's a criminal justice system, it's criminal courts, it's beyond all reasonable doubt, not on the balance of probabilities. And that won't change. But how we educate children can, and how we provide a service can change. And that was really what I set out to do. And it took about 20 years, but we ended up doing it. And what we changed was when those children come in and police don't have enough, but don't feel like they want to just show mum the door or don't want to say, come back. At least now they have an option. And that option is that they can refer them to protective behaviours education. And I had been one of the inaugural police officers who started the protective behaviours unit, and so I was well versed in protective behaviours. In fact, was instrumental in bringing a lot of the materials and knowledge to Western Australia through my role as a police officer, and then my ongoing involvement with Protective Behaviours WA Inc. when it became a independent not-for-profit group. And so we based our proposal on that. We based the proposal that when children come in and they give you part of the story but not all of the story, don't send them away, educate them. And so now what police do is they refer the child to Protective Behaviours Education. And Parkerville Children and Youth Care now provide that. Protective Behaviours WA Inc. used to, but they no longer. It's with Parkerville. And then they re-interview the child after the education. And a good number come back. And when they're interviewed again, like a post-educational interview, many children come back with enough information to allow police to then, you know, take that next step. It's not a silver bullet, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be something that's helpful. something that can remove the guilt from the child, something that can assist with removing the shame. And so towards the end of my career, it was really more about, not so much about the justice and not so much about law enforcement, but more about the healing. And that's when I went on to work for the Catholic Church. So I was approached by the Catholic Church. The Royal Commission had already begun, and the Catholic Church was shaping up to be the single largest contributor to the abuse of children in institutions in this country. And indeed, they went on to be the largest contributor to the sexual abuse of children in institutions. But at the time, the Catholic Church here in Perth, the Perth Catholic Archdiocese, wanted to get ahead of the curve, and they did take the issue very seriously. And the Archbishop at the time, he said to me, we want to be part of the solution. We know we're part of the problem historically, and we want to be part of the solution. And his mantra was, and I used to really hang on to that, he used to say, we are going to try and make the future very different to the past. And so I wasn't going to leave the police service to go and work for the Catholic Church, but I ended up doing that. I ended up going across, and initially it was in a 2-year leave without pay arrangement, but I ended up resigning from police and stayed with the Catholic Church to finish the job I'd gone over to do, and that was to develop the first protective behaviours /safeguarding program for the Perth Catholic Archdiocese, which has been now replicated through many dioceses throughout Australia. So I think we came up with a really good model, a model that was designed to educate children, to educate parents, to educate service providers, to educate parishioners, but to also minimise risk and to start the healing journey. So I then moved out of law enforcement into safeguarding. And it was kind of natural, because when you work in a preventative capacity and in an educational capacity, it kind of is an organic move into that healing. So I really enjoyed my work with the church. But after 7 years, I had an opportunity to then go and take on a role with Carnarvon Family Support Service. So my husband was born and bred in Carnarvon on a market garden, and I was born and bred on a market garden in South Coogee. So our natural ending was going to be on a plantation, and so we bought a plantation in Carnarvon and we raised our children in Carnarvon. I didn't work the plantation, I remained policing, and my husband did a bit of both until he resigned from policing just to do farming. But I spent 10 years in Carnarvon as a police officer, and I had a lot of involvement with the community and a lot of involvement with women and children particularly. And I had chaired the Carnarvon Family Support Service for 8 of those 10 years. And the Carnarvon Family Support Service ran the Women's Refuge, the outreach, the domestic violence outreach service. At the time, they were also running the Aboriginal Family Violence Prevention Service. We had the Sobering Up Centre, the public tenancy support, financial counselling, protective behaviours, men's anger management. So all of those, I call them the back end to policing. It's the services that police need but don't actually operate. So I ended up going from policing to church work to now going back to Carnarvon to run the Carnarvon Family Support Service, which is now known as CFSS WA Limited. But I was only there for a 2-year period. There was a requirement to go for 2 years, and the 2 years had ended. And we decided that in that space, my work with child protection and prevention education was too valuable to just leave. And so together we founded the Child Focused Safety Service, which is owned by CFSS WA Limited, but it operates out of Perth. I'm the director and I run it. I'm in charge of the day-to-day running operation of Child Focused, and that's really a role that I can really get my teeth into, because it's about prevention, it's about education, it's about prevention. But we came up with an idea when I was in the seat. I had some funding. I had Department of Communities funding, and because of the work I was doing with police in Carnarvon and the I suppose the issues around child sexual abuse, I wanted to create something that would help the children. And I remember spending many opportunities going into schools and play groups and running parent workshops to educate on protective behaviours and prevention, and empowering children to say something if something's happened, to say something. But what I was finding was a lot of children weren't connecting with the messages. They just kind of seemed to go over their heads, and it wasn't really resonating the way I wanted it to resonate. So the second time I went back to Carnarvon, and that was in 2020, the beginning of 22, because I had funding, I thought, no, we're going to write a storybook. To resonate, we'll write a storybook. And so I did. I wrote Keeping Kids Safe in Carnarvon, and I consulted with children, local children. I consulted with the traditional owners and some of the elders. And from there, Keeping Kids Safe in Carnarvon was born. It was a booklet written for kids in Carnarvon, with kids in Carnarvon. And the book comes in two parts. It's all about Carnarvon in the first half, and a map of Carnarvon, where they live, where they play, where they go to school, what they do on weekends. So the kids can connect with the actual first half of the book.
landscape.
Yeah, and then the second half of the book are the important messages of protective behaviours. And it's changed so much. It's I don't know, I can't tell you how much difference it's making, but we know it's making a difference. Earlier this year, we had a young girl in grade 1 take the book to Book Week as her favourite book, and dressed up as one of the characters in the book. So we know we're having an impact. And I think, although I've written lots of protective behaviours materials, be it parent workshops or parent workbooks or children's workbooks, or I wrote a lot of Catholic materials, I think this is my greatest achievement, because it's actually resonating with children. And the children we're talking about is 3 to 9 years of age. It's giving parents a tool to teach this incredibly hard subject to teach them. And then it's just growing, and then it grew. So Geraldton saw it. Geraldton wanted Keeping Kids Safe in Geraldton. Tom Price saw it in Panawanika. Beg your pardon, Parabadoo. Derby, we're currently running Derby. We've gone as far as Brisbane, Bundaberg, Keeping Kids Safe in Bundaberg. So it's sort of it was just written for Carnarvon, but it's growing its own legs. And I think that's a great thing, because we're educating children in a very simple fashion and giving parents the tools to be able to do that. So that gives me pride, and it pleases me to know that something simple is actually making a difference in children's lives.
Wow.
So, and then I returned, and so that 2 years was up, and then I ended up back in a safeguarding role. I'm the safeguarding lead for the Police and Community Youth Centres statewide. And that's a role that I'm really enjoying as well. It kind of works because of my policing background. It's kind of all comes together in the police role, because it's the prevention, it's the response, it's the trying to heighten detection, looking at risk management, because Police and Community Youth Centres work with a vast array of children and a diverse array of children. And we're up in Kununurra, and we're as far down as Albany, and there are centres everywhere in between. So we had to have a really strong, robust safeguarding program, and I think we've achieved that. Of course, we're going to continuously improve that program, but my current role now is... So I started that project as well. There was no safeguarding at Police and Community Youth Centres before I started. So we've started that project, and so I'm about projects. You know, like I start a project, and when I feel that I've finished the project, I move on and I start another project. But I suppose the focus has always been about the safety of children. Even as a police officer, you're a police officer to protect and serve, and to protect children is a big part of that, and I made it a big part of my career.
Wow. So much to talk there, and such a breadth of experience you have, done a fair role of works. But I'm interested in, as a young girl raised in farms, Yes, that conversation with the policewoman, made you think about to go into that career. But what are the core values, and how do you think the way you think, and the values which came through growing up in a family or in a structure? How your values and purpose evolved through growing up, and then how has that shown up in these roles?
Sure. Well, I was raised on a market garden, but I was raised by my mum and dad. My mum being a very strong Catholic. My mum was a Maltese immigrant when she was 7 years of age, and she comes from a large Maltese family. My grandparents were both born in Malta, and their Catholic faith shaped the way they lived. And therefore, my mum and my dad, obviously, my upbringing has shaped the way I live today as well. I suppose I've always had a belief system. It's about giving, and giving to those who are less fortunate than yourself. I've always been quite selfless and put other people before myself. As a young child, I never had an experience of sexual abuse as such. But I came close. I came very close. But I was lucky to have escaped that. And the person who I was in close contact with went on to be charged with child sex offences. So I was very lucky. And I think it's always been there to help people. I think it's part of me. My mum and dad raised me in a way that it's more about giving than taking. It's more about other people. My faith tells me that, and my Catholic belief systems is about that, So I think my faith has always been a guiding principle for me, and to do the right thing. And I suppose that's in the end, that's why I went to work for the church, because I never was going to do that. I was never going to leave the police service. That was going to be my one career. But as a Catholic woman, I found that maybe that's where the Holy Spirit wanted me to be. And I truly believe that. I felt that the Holy Spirit was guiding me into that work. I think I contributed a lot in that space. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. Because that deepened my faith. Working for the church actually deepened my faith. And
I could see the transition from one role to other role is very deeper and more powerful and more impactful.
Well, that's funny you should ask that, or you should say that, because one of the reasons why I didn't want to leave the police service and then go and work for the church was because I thought I wouldn't be as impactful. I didn't think I would have as much impact in educating children and parents out of a uniform. But I was quite surprised. I actually had greater impact in the church than I did when I was with police. So the police uniform did serve a purpose, but quite often it could also be a negative. Whereas the work in the church was all fairly positive. It was all faith-based. So it gave me a much bigger platform. And a lot of the children's resources that I wrote them in line with biblical references and, the Catholic faith. So, me personally, when you've got God on your side, you can't go wrong. But that's just me personally. In the role that I'm in now, it's not a faith-based role. It's a very general role. And again, it's about treating everybody equal. Well, it's actually not about treating people equal. It's about treating individuals with care and affection and compassion. And what I've come to learn is that it's not about treating people equal so much as it is providing people with what they need.
Yeah.
We're not all equal. We have different needs. We come from different backgrounds. We have different belief systems, different upbringings. We aren't all equal. We don't all need the same thing. So what I've learned in the last couple of years is that inclusion, equity and diversity is about giving people what they need, not treating everybody as equal. So I've had a bit of a learning period in that space as well. So that's been good. And that's what I mean when it comes together. You know, you can work quite secular, and the church role is fairly, you know, it's quite defined.
And I don't think so. Being, you know, using the word secular also, you still don't need to have suppress the values you bring to the table as being a person of faith.
No,
they're not at each other. They could live parallel in the same person.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, Christian belief systems are a good way to live your life. You know, fairness, love, affection, compassion. They're all good traits to bring to whatever it is that you're doing. And especially when you're working with children and children who are marginalised or children who are at risk or are vulnerable. You know, the more you can give, I think, the better the outcome.
As a policewoman, police officer, at the front line, when you are dealing with day in, day out with multiple cases from, you know, more sexualized, more difficult conversations to be had at all the levels, how do you, it would be challenging. A little bit, listening to you when you were talking about the first scenario was a bit of jarring to me as to listen only. But if you are day in, day out doing that, how do you manage yourself and keep yourself a bit more, to use the word, you know, a bit more normal or sane?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. A lot of people say to me, or have said to me in the past, how do you do the work that you do? My short answer has always been, well, how can I not do that work? Someone's got to do the work. Strangely, I enjoy that work, and that seems a weird thing to say, but I do enjoy helping
the outcomes,
people.
Yeah.
I do enjoy seeing an outcome. So I like the work, and I think, again, I say that God gave me a gift, and the gift was to be able to manage that and to be able to turn off. Not everybody can do that, but I have found it quite easy, and not to turn off I don't mean that in a harsh way, but to be able to turn off, to rest, be refreshed, and come back and do it all again. Yeah. So as a police officer, you weren't dealing with it all the time. In the earlier days, it was more common. In fact, when I graduated from the police academy, all the female police officers got an extra couple of days. We weren't able to leave. We had to stay back, and we were trained in responding to sexual and physical abuse of children, whereas the men weren't. It was just the women police officers that had undergone that training. Well, now it's that training is now a 6-month course, and it's a forensic course. So it's come a long way. And there are specialised policewomen that deal with that, like sex crimes unit, the child abuse unit. There's specialised areas now. And there always was the child abuse unit, but it was a very small unit. And now the sex crimes unit is quite a large unit. So it shows you how far we've come in that space.
When you were thinking of setting up that protective behaviours unit/department, and you were the initial founder. So one is the why when it was very up in the face that you need to have that, but and how did you dealt with interacting with people within the organization and then making it more of a reality than an idea?
I think that's just awareness, you know, education and awareness. We weren't a big unit. Our task was to educate children and families. So we worked very closely with schools. And then that took me into what they called the school-based policing program. And I was the first school-based police officer attached to South Fremantle Senior High School down in the Fremantle region. And so that was a good sounding board for me because that was a good opportunity to learn and to apply it with the students and to make it better and to work with them and to hear their voices and to get them to help us shape the way programs for children would be written and delivered to children. So I think through those channels, and I work very closely with a lot of teachers and a lot of education department people, and they were very instrumental in helping us get those messages out. The police, not so much. It was a unit that was developed by police. So Protective Behaviours, the actual program was developed in America, and the Victorian Police Service were the police service that brought it to Australia. And then the WA Police Service took it from the Victoria Police Service, and it was then it started in what they called the Youth Services Command many years ago. And in the Youth Services Command, there were all those other services, Aboriginal Affairs, police and community youth centres, school-based policing, blue light disco, neighbourhood watch. So there was all those community-based organisations. And so we use those platforms to get the messages out as well. But it took a long time for police to use the program in a more reactive way. It's always been a preventative program, but now it's both. It's prevention and it's reactive, because if a child does come in and say something but doesn't say enough, or makes a disclosure to police or Department of Child Protection but hasn't provided enough, now it is reactive. So we'll refer you.
And it's typically known that you can do more at prevention stage, so that it's not too much to be done on the reaction stage.
Well, that's the idea.
That's the idea, yeah.
That's the whole idea.
That's the assumption, but you were getting more responses on the reactive stage. Is that what you were saying? In
the early days of policing, yes, we were responding to more than we were working in the preventative space. So I was well grounded in responding to children who had been sexually abused. And I suppose that leads on from your earlier question, how do you do the work that you do? If I only did that work, then maybe it would affect me. But because it's balanced between prevention, which is proactive, and reactive policing, and even the work that I do now, although it's not statutory work, it's both. With police and community youth centres, it's proactive, it's trying to prevent and detect, but it's also responsive, because we have to react when the cases come in, or when what we call a safeguarding incident report form is made by our staff. Then I need to respond to that as the safeguarding lead. So,
can I just a bit more deflect onto the case which happened earlier this year in Victoria? That man was going around multiple childcare centres. Yes. How does the system gears up around, because kids are being exposed to adults at different settings, not just in a school setting, but at childcare centres and before school and after school care centres. So how do you see the system is working or is operating? What can be done better in those spheres?
Okay. Well, it's a good question, because the role that I currently have with police and community youth centres, we do have out of our school care, so before and after school care, and that has been one of our priority areas for safety, because the younger the children, the more vulnerable they are. Yeah. That comes down to good safeguarding mechanisms. And those stories that we hear about, they're not stories, they're real cases that happened in the East Coast. That comes down to inadequate safeguarding, inadequate codes of behaviour, inadequate staff training. I mean, how does an individual get themselves into a position where they can create child pornography on their personal device when at work? Well, there's only one way that can happen, is that they're left unsupervised with children. So that would be a clear breach of the code of behaviour. Staff not being made aware of their professional responsibilities. And safeguarding, and while we have safeguarding, is all based on the national principles for creating child-safe organisations. And it's not one principle doesn't do it on its own. We like to look at safeguarding as Swiss cheese. Okay, Swiss cheese has holes in it. So it's not until you lay a Swiss cheese that you're going to close those gaps. And safeguarding is the same. There's not one particular principle or one particular preventative measure that's going to keep children safe. There is no 100% foolproof system for keeping children safe. It's about a series and a suite of processes to keep children safe. And I would say that on the East Coast and in other services where this happens and occurs, is that safeguarding hasn't been present, hasn't been front and centre of everything that the organisation does. And the Catholic Church was a good example of that. Historically, there was no safeguarding. So, an organisation that safeguards, and when I say safeguards, Dev, I mean safeguards well, not just ticks the box, but takes it really serious. We'll be able to provide a safer environment for children. And so I think that's the future going forward. It's about organisations and institutions making sure that their safeguarding programs are as tight as they can possibly be and are as robust as they possibly can be.
When I got through a bit of a Royal Commission on the abuse for young kids, and one thing which I picked up was kids with disabilities are more, vulnerable towards abuse.
Yep.
And I was reading a bit of accounts, and it was difficult to read through the accounts. But
how do you see in those settings, kids with some form of disability or non-verbal are overexposed or more vulnerable than other kids? And how does this, a safeguarding, how far do you push safeguarding to be purely governing everybody all the time, every time, versus protecting children appropriately and trying to do our best?
So you're right. We say that 1 in 4 children in Australia will have some form of unwanted sexual touch or activity before they turn 18. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about children with disability, mm-hmm. or as we like to say, different abilities, it doubles, mm-hmm. 1 in 2. Mm-hmm. So essentially that's 50% of children with a disability will have some form of unwanted sexual touch before they turn 18. Mm-hmm. Why is the data so high? Well, because those who offend against children are always looking for opportunities, mm-hmm. not only to offend against children, mm-hmm. but to get away with it. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about safeguarding and organisations that work with children with varying abilities, it's really important, as I spoke about earlier, to make sure every child gets what they need. Mm-hmm. So in a safeguarding environment, what does that child need to be safe? Is the child verbal? Are they non-verbal? Do we need to amend the way we educate? And so there you go, there's the key. Educating the child is the most important safeguarding tool that we can rely on. Because when children are abused, quite often they're abused in isolation. Mm-hmm. They don't have the language to be able to prevent the abuse. And even if they don't have the language and the abuse occurred, or they do have the language and the abuse occurred, it's not the child's responsibility to keep themselves safe. Yeah. It's adults' responsibility. But what we have learned over many years, and probably the last 30 years, is that educating children with the language of safety and the language of protective behaviours is the most important, because they need to be able to resist a sex offender or a child sex offender. Someone thinking about having sex with a child or offending against a child has a number of preconditions they have to overcome. Mm-hmm. The first one is having a thought to do it in the first place, so a motivation. Mm-hmm. Those with a motivation then need to overcome their internal inhibitors, which is their conscience. If they manage to jump that wall, then they need to get access to children. Mm-hmm. And if they manage to get access to children, the last brick wall is overcoming the child's resistance. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty simple. We need to educate children, all children. But a child with a disability, a child that's more vulnerable than another child, needs extra education. Because they just need more. They need more education. That education needs to be tailored to their needs, and we need to find ways to educate them differently, maybe to mainstream.
Do you think offenders and abusers are more likely to be looking for job roles or employment in those spaces where there are more young people available? As you said,
Absolutely.
The last stage of the abuse is to find source in a locations where you can have access to more kids.
Yes, I do. Whilst there's no psychological profile of a child sex offender, one doesn't exist. What we do know is child sex offenders seek opportunity. So seeking opportunity would be seeking a role where they have regular contact with children, where they're in a position of power and control over children, because that's all going to increase their opportunity. So do they seek out places of employment or volunteering? Yes, indeed they do. Not always. You have different, child sex offenders come in all shapes and forms. For example, you'll have some offenders that we call intrafamilial offenders. They'll only ever abuse within their own families. Or they're not going to look for jobs necessarily that brings them in contact with children. But the intrafamilial is those who will only offend within their families, and extrafamilial are those who will offend outside of their families as well. And quite often they will gravitate to roles or seek opportunities that puts them in place with children on a regular basis and gives them a bit of power and control over the child. So a position of power and control, a position of authority.
When you use the word education, and also I think one thing which comes to me as well, the language you use, and then some countries, some jurisdictions are changing the language of, calling people a child sex offenders to minor attracted people. So
yes.
I'm confused from a point of view to understand, how it should be clear on the label what it is, rather than either minimizing or overemphasizing. So what do you think about the language being used to define somebody who's done a heinous crime or want to do a heinous crime of offending a little child?
Well, I think the key word is crime.
Yeah.
It is a crime against children. Child sexual abuse is a crime against children. It's not a crime to have a sexual attraction to a child. But it is a crime to act on that sexual attraction. So, for example, there are some individuals, and both men and women, predominantly men, but women are also offenders and can be sexually attracted to children, who have the attraction, and the science is starting to point towards the biological attraction, but they never ever act on it. Versus someone who has an attraction and acts on it. That's the difference. If they act on that attraction, they're committing a crime. And as a criminal, they're an offender. And so from my background, I think it's, it would be safe to say that I think child sex offenders is the correct terminology. Not everybody will agree with that. The minor attracted person, they could also be a minor attracted person. But if they act on that attraction, they then become an offender. So I suppose the correct answer is, where are they in that stage? Are they just attracted, or are they acting on the attractions? And that there's a big difference.
What about the
minor attracted people?
Yes. What about in terms of the intervention or training happening, or identification of people before the action is committed?
Yes.
So how do you identify, and then people, would they come out and tell you, or how does, because how would police come into play, because then nothing has happened?
I think there's still a big stigma around that. There's a lot of research being done in Germany at the University of Berlin in the Department of Sexology, and it's called the Dunkelfeld Project. And what they found was that by allowing individuals who were attracted to children sexually, by allowing them to come and ask for help and to reach out, that in itself would be a form of prevention. Because if they reach out and they get help, then they may be less likely to act on their urges or to actually commit an offence. So they might be minor attracted, but they haven't actually offended. So they're not an offender, they're just simply a minor attracted person. But when one is attracted to children, there is going to be a certain amount of risk. So currently in Australia, we don't have that type of a service. And in fact, in the model that they use in Germany, the adverts for such a service are aired on primetime television. And the professor from the university who presented the session that I attended, he showed us one of the adverts, and it was a man on a train, and opposite him was a little girl playing with a doll, and he was kind of mesmerised by this little girl playing with her doll. And the caption said, "Do you like children?" And it paused a little bit. And then the next scene was, "More than you should like children. If so, call this number." So on primetime television, there is an ad for individuals who find themselves attracted to minors to reach out and get help. So that would come down to the individual. Are they prepared to go and get help? Do they need help? Do they want help? Or are they able to abstain from that type of behaviour? So the short answer to that, Deb, is we definitely need that. Some people will say, coming from an ex-police officer, that's a little bit of a different stance. But, for me personally, I don't think it should matter how we prevent crimes against children, and particularly sexual crimes against children. I think what matters is that we prevent them.
Yes.
And as long as they are lawful and they are ethical ways of preventing it, I think that's where we should start to put our energies. We know that the minor attracted person is going to be attracted in their teenage years. which means they're still children.
Yeah.
Don't we owe it to children to work in that space? I think once they've committed an offence, then that's probably not an option because they've already committed an offence. But before they commit offences, I think it's very real that we should offer those types of services, and we're not. There would be the odd practitioner, the odd therapist, the odd clinical psych that might be doing that, but definitely there is not enough service for the need. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, actually. That's where we need to be focusing. That's the next wave.
In conclusion, if you can, because leadership, understanding of leadership is very different in different spaces, whether you're working in different sectors. But with your work with, not just with police, with Khanam and Family Services, and then your work now and as a quality and safeguarding lead, as well as work with the Catholic Church, how has the leadership evolved? And then how do you see leadership to be for you, and how do you see in action?
I think it's about being brave in my space, not in every space, but in this space you have to be brave. It's a conversation not a lot of people want to have. It's a conversation that's difficult to hear, and I think you have to be brave, and leadership means having those hard conversations, being prepared to teach children about sex education, something that you get a lot of backlash for. A lot of parents aren't happy with teaching their children sex education, but it's a form of prevention. And so hitting those hard questions and being prepared to have them, I think, is leadership in this space. Also about developing those coming up under you. I mean, one person can't, protect children. It's about all of us playing our part. And I think, sharing the information is leadership, developing parents, developing children's education. That to me is leadership, flying the flag that every child has the right to feel safe all of the time, and doing what needs to be done to make that a reality. That's leadership in my space.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.